hopefully I'm back. We are now hot spotted. Whether anybody is here or everybody's given up and gone to watch Songs of Praise or Dancing on Ice with the Stars or whatever is on television nowadays. Let's see. So, to start all over again. Oh, welcome to 2026 and Pom's live feeds. They all go so well, don't they? I bet you're all sitting there laughing your socks off. And I don't blame you, because this happens nearly every week. Rob, you're still hanging in there, son. Well done. Welcome back. Well, let's see. I'm now on a hotspot on another phone, which is, I don't know. I don't understand anyway. So a few people still hanging in there. So thank you for that. So as mentioned, I'm going to have to do this again, because we're going to start the whole thing again. We're back. Gone back to those days of hot spotting. Yeah, exactly. So tonight's prize, let's just start that again. If you've just come in, hello everybody, welcome. So some maggot powders, jungle boosters, a block of crave paste, and some superb grips. So let's start with me to carry on. You're right there, Matt. So that is tonight's live feed prize, but it's going to be part of a demo. So if you'd like to be entered into the draw, all you've got to do is send yes to Pallatrax Facebook Messenger page. You make my Sunday evenings. Yeah, I sit there all day. Honestly, Darren, I think it's going to go wrong. It's going to go wrong. What's going to go wrong tonight? We would laugh at you. Would we laugh at you? Yeah, I bet you in hysterics, you evil man. Right, so let's do it. So this is just, like I say, a lot of people, I'm not saying all, and this can go for any species or any tactical approach, they don't necessarily adapt to literally the biology of the fish on the day, especially in cold water conditions. And I've said it many a time. I mean, tactically, you can use these tactics all year round. But when I think they really come into their own is in the winter months. So if you can just understand that fish basically, in reality, in many ways, go to sleep. It's almost like a hibernation. But they don't tend to stop feeding. But they feed very infrequently. And as they're not moving, they don't feed on a lot. Hence why you don't want to be using a lot of... yay, I'm back. Thanks, Matt. I'm still here. So you don't want to be using a lot of high nutritional food source, but the thing is, what you do want to do is you want to attract the fish, and again, and I will never ever stop reminding people, do look at the senses of fish and see how they use their olfactory system to sniff things on the water like we sniff things on the air. I think I was talking about it last week. It's like cooking the bacon. There's no, there's some bacon on the pan in the kitchen. Nobody's lit it. Then suddenly somebody's lit it and the whole house kind of reeks of cooking bacon. Hi, Sam. And that's what I'm trying to do, especially in the winter. I'm not putting out a great deal of bait. I'm really trying to focus on where I'm going to put my bait. That's a big priority. There is no point in sitting in a swim with no fish showing. I know it's difficult in the winter, but if you get your binoculars and things like that, if you're on bigger waters, you can look for bubbles. You can, pay attention. Obviously nowadays a lot of people sit in their bivvies and they're on their phones and things like that, which is fine if that's the way you want to roll. But you're missing a lot of opportunities by not watching water. And watching water has led to me to pack up, move and catch when I have been blanking. Heidi Simmons, Happy New Year to you and your family. Send my best to Mark. So this is just one way, and the thing is, you can interpret this kind of thing in lots of different ways. So here we go, folks. Hold on to your hats. Let me turn the camera around. I shouldn't be pressing buttons. So my standard rig, Steam Link, £25 Steam Link, which gives me this super stiff boom, and incredibly flexible. And I can't beat this as a rig. I know lots of people here will, and again, I've got no hidden agenda. I developed this stuff for us, to be quite honest. So it's certainly worth having a look at. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a squab and I'm going to cut it down. And this is, you can do this all year round, but this is when you've got to realise Watching the water better entertainment. I totally agree with you there, Glenn. So, oh, well done, Rod. Did you see you had a new PB? Well, like I say, the stone system works all round. It's just trying to get past the industry narrative that there's only, like, their way is the only way, when I can assure you it's not. So I'm just going to break this down into like a 10mm squab. Okay, and I'm taking off all of the skin. And I've said on occasions before, if you think about the skin, that will stop the bait breaking down and flavours and attractors kind of actually escaping. So it's never a bad idea to trim off the skin any road, but in the winter even more relevant, because you're trying to get that flavour out. Now hopefully that's about the right size. So again, it's kind of like not just grabbing it out of the bag and throwing it out. You're going to spend a bit of time and a bit of attention to detail. So on with my baiting needle. Then we're about to get slightly mucky. So I'm just going to mount that on the hair. Now I hardly ever fish with a long hair. All areas of fishing I've done, you know, your bait and your hook are one. And I know there's a school of thought in carp fishing, especially like long hairs and things like that. I'm happy with all these years of angling to stay focused on the short hair. Don't get me wrong, if you sat next to me and catching fish after fish on a long hair, I'll be moving over. But in all honesty, it's never happened, and I don't think it will. And that's said with no arrogance. It's just there's a lot of dynamics coming in. You've only got to watch under fishing on YouTube or, to see how many times a fish will pick up the bait on a longer hair and not inhale the hook. So that's all I've done. Okay, now you can shave that off. Now that obviously in cold water temperatures will last quite a long time. Okay, so you're going to always be fishing with this. But what you need to now think about is how are you going to boost that out. Now the first thing I would do, where is my gumbo? Just move this back a little bit. Clear the mess. All those bits of chippings I'll be putting in with my method mix. So this is water based. So this is really, really relevant. It's got things like certain attractors in there that will really boost it. And so you can cut some of these hook baits up before you go, and then just put them on a little bag and keep them soaked like that. So that's the first stage. I just literally douse that. I mean, and the whole place stinks of jungle now, tiger nut and peanut. But this is a milk protein bait, HMV base mix, and jungle. If you said to me I had to fish a Pallatrax bait in the winter, I would be on jungle. So then you come up with a bit of the old frozen paste. So this is basically the paste that that we make prior to it going into the extruder, so prior to it going into any form of process. So this is just all of the ingredients and fresh egg to create the initial paste. And paste is so underrated. It's like anything though. You've got to sorry, let's see, Evening Palm being Ashley, hello, Darren with the steam link. If you yes, just re-steam it, it will completely straighten out. Hi Les, what's the giveaway? Left it was super laggy for me. Now I'm back. Oh, there's like this is what the giveaway, Callum, is what I'm using here now in this little demo. So lots of different bits. I will say again in a bit. Right. Next thing is, and this is something to be quite honest, I was writing a feature today on for Catch More Fish, and I was talking about attractants and why aren't we really focusing on natural attractants. You know, flavours, yes, of course they have their time and place, different attractors, but why aren't we actually focusing on things that we know without a shadow of a doubt? No, Jason, please, I know the emphasis is always tends to move towards carp. That's just because more people are fishing carp. These things work exactly the same, especially on the rivers for chub and barbel and fish like tench, you know, really do. So yeah, it's certainly an all-round kind of bait. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put some of that there just to dry off the outer cover. You can actually just dink it in there if you want. And then, now you could just put that out, you know, so it's highly flavoured. It's always a nightmare trying to get, so it's highly flavoured, and you've got the addition, but no, that's not enough for me. And this is where you've got to be slightly careful. So I'm now going to get some paste, and I'm going to actually, in that mix of maggot and jungle juice, I'm going to put it in there. And you can really jam a lot of the maggot powder in there, but you can use the Daphne, you can use all the other, you know, natural powders I do. And they are literally ground down, you know, natural life forms, and containing so much, you know, so many valuable attractors. What's Will saying? Years ago I made up HMV paste that I feel 100% made the difference on a late season session here in Canada. Managed 2 in some proper chilly waters. Yeah, paste is so... Firstly, you've got to remember paste is all about... Any bait is all about the ingredients. So, you know, if you've got a good base mix, HMV, you know, loads of attractors, you know by design you're in with a good shout. So, it's... Right, so I'm going to add a bit more, because there's more is more when it comes to this stuff. So you can really, you know, poke this in. And if you want to keep on building it, you can, like I say, you can use a whole cube of it. You can freeze it back down so it will work. So just take it out on the day, use what you need. So what I'm doing now is I'm now going to conquer off. So literally I'm going to spread this around my bait. The one shape I'm not looking to make is round. As people know me, I'm not a fan of the round shape. Baits are only round because of the machines. So you just work it on there, and then you've got that. Then, and these things, you know, we sit there, especially in the winter, for a long old time, so it don't take much. But then suddenly you're thinking you put a bait out, so then jungle juice that up again. And then I put it back in the old maggot powder. Now, hopefully you can realise why that's good for a bite. So you've got several layers of attractant there. Okay, and like I say, you can really experiment as well, which I think is the exciting thing about Pallatrax. You can personalise it. So what I'm going to do is just going to dunk that in the tank, and you can see it works straight from the off, even in cold water conditions. And that's the key here. You know, you're fishing with baits that Hi Dave, hope you're well. What's Callum saying? Jason, I used to use the purple mainline one on maggots for roach works well, struggling on the flower. Okay. If you were a fish, yummy. That's from Anthony. So if I just kind of zoom in a bit here, if I can actually get that to work, and we'll come back to this in a bit. But what you've got, even in cold water, you've got something happening. So you've got things actually spreading around. You've got this paste in cold water conditions will probably last for a couple of hours, if not more. Now, if you go down that route in summer months, you have to just, you just have to be more aware that the warmer water and potentially smaller fish, which will be more active, will be nibbling away at it. So, so there you go. So tonight's prize, I'll just go back through it. Hang on a second, let me put the lid on it. Let's just come back to me. Right, there we go. So tonight's prize, the calorie you just asked. So it's all basically the ingredients to this this demo, which is a way to boost these hook baits, and we're looking for these edges in the winter. If you carry on doing the same thing time and time again, expecting different results, it's the first sign of madness. So if you go out there and say, right, I want to design something to actually happen for all the right reasons, then surely your confidence is only growing, especially if it makes common sense. So tonight's prize, the maggot powders I've been using. The Jungle Overspray, the Crave Paste, some grip hooks, and a nice Pallatrax sticker. So all you got to do is send the word yes to the Pallatrax Facebook page, and you'll all be in with a shout. But don't forget the power of paste. You know, it's going to break down because it's not being boiled or steamed or anything like that. So it'll break down. It really does work all year round. And I say in the winter, when you're trying to get a really reactive, like I say, you know, we've got the reactive range, which comes from a slightly different place, because we're talking about synthetic flavour attractors still combined with a food source bait. But then you can go on that little bit more and really personalise baits and fish it. You know, I wouldn't fish this with a lot of other bait. I'd be putting it somewhere where perhaps I put some sick mix in. So I'd really, you know, scrunged up some pellet or some squabs, made them almost liquefied, and poured that in with a spoon. And then I put this on top. I wouldn't put lots and lots of food or lots of freebies around it. What do you reckon the shelf life of the powders are? I have a couple that are at least 2 years on, still dry. Are they safe to use? Yes, Paul, they will be. They've been irradiated. They're fully, there won't be anything wrong with them whatsoever, my friends. So, where is this? Does the place, oh, sorry, does the paste fly off with a cast? No, not at all. Not at all. You can wrap it round it. You know, lots of us put a thin layer around the stone as well. So you're literally coating the stone, doing exactly the same. We're then layering it with flavours. So we're layering. And you know, because the conditions on the day will always make the main difference. But you're actually thinking about why you're going to get a bite instead of just hoping you're going to get a bite. And it works. The reactive range, can you shave down and put back in a liquid ready for a session? You can do. Not a problem whatsoever. Yeah, just whack it straight back in. You know, it's a food safe, and you can just use them time and time again. Like, you know, I'm the first person to say don't use a lot of my bait because you don't need to, and you can reuse it and can catch lots of fish on the same bait. So nothing wrong with that. I have a new tackle box that needs stickers. You never know what Santa might send across to chilly Canada. I would say in the summer months, 30 minutes max, and I would reel and reapply if I hadn't had a bite fish. Yeah, again, it's going to be very much dependent on lots of different things, Anthony. I'd never ever just set it out and say, right, that's it. I would perhaps make some up, put it in the margin, see how long. But what you will end up with is you'll still end up with the squab cut down, still fishing. So even when all those other things have kind of dissipated, you'll still have that chunk of squab that you've over flavoured. And flavours, you just got to think of flavours, why we're using flavours. A lot of people will just use flavour because it's the thing, you know, it's the trend, or, you know, somebody on Facebook has said it, it's me. But really think about why. Why would you be using it? Why would it work? And that's where, like I say, I've always been surprised that, you know, I brought out baits like multi-worm, and that's what I was writing about in my feature today. You know, natural attractors are so ignored. You know, we've got things like krill, and how much krill percentage is in these baits, I don't know. Is it real krill? Where's it come from? You know, like I see bloodworm pellets that have just got a bloodworm flavour. They haven't, you know, a synthetic flavour, not really made of you know, actual physical bloodworm. So sorry, I'm missing a few. Let's stand by, folks. Oh, this is a good one from Liam here. Do you think flavouring our attractors can be overdone? I think that's what you're saying. And yes, that is the enigma, I suppose, or the anomaly. Can you over flavour a bait where the fish just do not like it? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, there's that potential. But again, it's about the averages. And where I come from, and all my kind of field testing and experimentation has come from when I'm fly fishing with an over-flavoured cork ball, and seeing the time and time again the fish hitting the cork ball above anything else is literally just coming to the flavour. So that's kind of what set me on that trend. But again, you know, these kind of tactics you can use on the surface. So you can just, again, get a piece of cork instead of the squab, cut it down, hair rig it, wrap your pastes and flavours around it, and then you're just letting it float around. As long as you get the cork ball and the paste that's wrapped around it at the right level, really, really good surface baits. When other people are just saying, right, okay, I'm going to use, I mean, you know, the standard, like, you know, we do the floater pellets, the proper carp pellets, but you're limiting yourself by just sticking to one bait. And I would always say, whatever, be like the match angler and always have that ability to adapt on the day and have different baits. And this is where pastes come into the zone, because you can make up several different ones here, you know, with different attractors, you know, one with Daphnia, one with just nothing, you know, you can make all these different things up and you can try them. But all I can do is promise you they work. And if you actually sit there and think about it and you go, okay, well, I'm not in my angling using these natural powders, where could I use it? And so we put them in all kinds of things, like in our method mixes. We coat things, as you've seen. We actually internally put them in. You know, a lot of the times in the old days, when I had more time, I would literally make up lots of different small hook baits. So I'd literally get my pastes, ram it up with flavours, and then I'd literally boil it off for no more than 10 seconds. So I'm just skinning, and then basically I've got a load of little hook baits. Baldy Dave taught me this. The guy that taught me this carp fishing over 30 years, or no, 30 years ago now, was when I first met him, he would always come fishing and he'd have this little tiny bag of hook baits, and he'd made those separately, and the amount of fish he caught compared to the rest of us, because he'd focused so much on what was on the hair, you couldn't deny it. It was all HMV, it was all old school, and the fact that he wasn't, you know, when you're making bait, the time you boil or steam will dictate the thickness of the skin. And the thicker it is, the less chance, as long as there's something inside it, of it getting out. And so all you really want to do is have that skin, if you really go into the detail, just thick enough to keep it held together. And that's where I'm convinced if you spend more time thinking about these kind of things than worrying about some of the stuff the industry tells you about, that you've got to do this super duper fandango rig or things like that, you will get much more bites. You know, I don't muck around with rigs, as I've said 100 million times. You know, I've got rigs that work, I've only got a couple, and then I focus on the baits and things like this. So there we go. Here in Canada, frequently fish with method and paste on our weights and hit 100 yards regularly. Yeah, exactly. You know, you can really hoof it out there. Cliff Dixon is saying, interesting to see the powders floating up and down in the water. I coat my hemp with it in summer, so it explains why I catch so many decent silvers on the drop. Yeah, exactly. You know, anything that you can get out. And again, going back to the kind of analogy, I suppose, of when you're walking through the fun fair, and you know, suddenly somebody turns on the burger machine, and suddenly, you know, you can't see it, there's crowds all around you, but you can smell it. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get that out to their olfactory system. So the closer you can put it to it, the better. And I'll tell you, I'll just go through these questions. I'll tell you a prime example that really set me on a journey here. If scared of your paste coming off, wrap it in a bit of PVA mesh. It won't come off, Glenn. I promise you, I've designed it not to, so you won't need to do anything like that. Can you use liquid from the reactive baits in your method mix? You could, you know, but the thing is, you want to keep, I would literally keep it, once you run out of reactive baits, you know, stick some more in there, but you do have to, just to make sure you drill a hole through it, because it will harden off. Sean Davis, love the multi-worm. Yeah, well, that's the story about multi-worm is, and there is another bait coming out later this year called Crustacean Cocktail, which I developed a long time ago. But now we're only doing squabs. I've got more capacity to manufacture, and this will come out in 14 and 18 mil squabs, and that's very shrimp based. And these are two baits that were designed, you know, 2 decades ago now. And when I bought multi-worm out, I couldn't sell it for love nor money. I could not sell it. And do you know why? Simply because people didn't like the colour, didn't like the flavour. They weren't interested or even, you know, questioned me about what it was physically made of, which is like silkworm and earthworm and mealworm and a hybrid milk protein fish meal base mix and etc, etc. They were just saying, yeah, but it smells wrong. And again, with no arrogance, we're not fish, and fish don't do, you know, they're not dealing with things like that. You know, they're very simplistic creatures. They have to eat, they have to find things that are food. If not, they'll starve. And so, you know, multi-worm, I suppose, really highlighted. And I was the worst. I was terrible with things like Esterberry, Plum Royale, Pineapple Hawaiian, Tutti Frutti. I loved all those flavours. I would fish on them, and consequently, because I was fishing on them, I would catch. But was I missing out? And that's when I went down the naturals route. And anybody that knows Pallatrax, yes, we're a relatively small company in the big scheme of things, but we're really thinking about why and what we're doing. And we embrace naturals, and the way we're using naturals is why we're catching fish. Blending earthworms is deadly. Yeah, we used to do chopped worm in the old days. I can't do it anymore. For perch. Yeah. Good evening, John. Hope watching the football. Oh, that's too difficult for me. Should I boost my floaters? I have free line floaters on small lakes. Will it make fish go for the hook bait rather than the freebies? They're all the same, but without added. Again, it's a trial and error, Callum, to be quite honest. The trouble is, if you're going to boost all your floaters, okay, you're not having one that's going to stand out amongst the crowd, and which is where I come from. So when I'm floater fishing, I put my floaters out, start to get some fish going, and that's when I'll then put a different flavour in amongst the mix. Now, if that flavour is working on the day, and it's a bit like changing lures or changing flies, I'm changing flavours, you'll pretty quickly see a reaction. It could be that you just go with the floaters, you know, totally unflavoured. But time and time again, and lots of people see me fly fishing down here, they will back me up that simply the flavour is standing out, so the fish just come into it. Because don't forget, when they're taken off the surface, their eyes are here, their mouth's there. So they're not going to be able to physically see it as we see it. So they're coming in, and how many times do you see them try to take floaters and they're missing them? Because they can't actually see it. They're just using the sensors around their mouths to actually find it. And hi, Twitty Peter K. Hope you're doing well. So hopefully that makes sense, Callum. But, you know, I personally, I would suggest you flavour up, especially with boosters, because it's got water, so it will ingress quickly, but obviously it will soften the bait. So just be careful of that. But, you know, if you're going to flavour all of your floaters, I think it's really missing the point, because you need that one to stand out. So what's Sam saying? I have Crave Jungle, Reactive Plum, Reactive Strawberry, Mulchworm, plus all the fluors and pop-ups, still blank. Well, bad workman blames his tools, Sam. No, it's like, it's just fishing, isn't it? You know, if we could catch every time, it would be so much easier. But lake throws stuck to a peg, so couldn't go searching for fish. Always next time. And that's true, Sam. It's always next time. And surely the experience was better than sitting watching Netflix. Hopefully, at any rate. But of course, it's difficult in the winter. But what I would say, and some of my best results have been in the winter, where I've had multiple captures. It's simply because I've found the shoal. You know, and you nick a fish off, and the shoal doesn't appear to spook, and then you nick another fish out. And I've had some really good winter hits just by doing that. Not putting a load of bait out, just putting things like this out. Yeah, it's always about finding the shoal, and by being that much closer to them, and then putting out a bait that's designed to draw them in, instigate feeding. You can only do so much, can't you? And, you know, I see a lot of people making the mistake of saying, well, I'm going to change rig. It's not your rig, it's the bait. In all other areas of fishing, you change your bait. You don't change your rig. And carp fishing especially, and now it's percolating into like barbel fishing, it's become very robotic. Very like, you know, I know barbel anglers that say, well, I'll only fish on pellet. Now, obviously, if they're enjoying it, and, you know, I'm not here to critique anybody, as long as people are fishing safely and, you know, we're mindful of the environment and things like that. But were you a match angler, would you say this year I'm only going to fish on pellet? and you don't even know what the pellet's made of. You wouldn't do that. You'd have choices. And that's one thing in all other areas of fishing I've done. I've said it so many times. I've written about it so many times. Whether it gets through or not but people will just stick to one bait. And in modern fishing, when that doesn't work, you know, it doesn't work. Match fishing, fly fishing, lure fishing, sea fishing, you've always got different choices on the day. If you're just sticking on one, you know, let's just use strawberry as an innocuous. So you love fishing on strawberry, you've caught well on strawberry. What about the days you haven't caught? It doesn't mean your bait's rubbish. It just means that for whatever reason, it didn't take the fish's fancy. And that's something you don't want to overcomplicate, but you can strive by using things like that. And you're coming out for a totally different angle. What's Miles saying? Do you worry that wrapping paste around the stones as well as the bait will create force bites from the carp? That's a question that's been asked, and it's a good point, Miles. I think at the end of the day, it's never been a problem for me. I've never felt I'm getting force indication. And that's because basically I'm having to make various assumptions. But of course, you will potentially get your stones knocked around by the fish. But you could say that about method feeder. You could say that about PVA bag tactics. It's never, all I can honestly say, it's never been, I'm sitting there going, oh, they're just knocking my stone around. I felt that sometimes in some of the ways I fish the method. Yeah, it's never been something that has been detrimental, if that makes sense. But it's a good point. Ben's saying, I have the reactive multi-worm. I might go for some tench with them, tomorrow for lake isn't frozen. Yeah, well, tench is a little bit of a difficult one, in all honesty, Ben, this time of year. They're one of the few fish, I'm not saying you won't catch them, because we have caught them in the depths of winter, but they tend to really kind of go into that moribund state. And but you never know, got to be in it to win it. There does seem some awful weather all over the country coming in. We're not too bad down here, but there's some cold weather, so stay safe, stay warm. Rob's looking forward to the release of the crustacean cocktail. Yeah, that will be late spring, Rob, once I've got everything sorted. So Chris saying, I have had some great sessions on multi-worm when it's raining hard, colour in the water, and the fish are obviously searching out naturals that are washing in. Yeah, I mean, this is, again, you know, a lot of people put a huge amount of focus. I used to see it in my first tackle shop, and I had the Richworth range, the whole Richworth range. And, you know, there must have been 20, 25 different colours and flavours of baits. And I'd see how trends were like, people would be attracted by colour. Okay, and I actually started questioning people about this because I find it quite interesting. So people would be interested in the colour. So that was the first reason to pick the bag up, because it was bright, shiny, a favourite colour. The assumption, oh, I can see it, the fish can see it, all those kind of things folding in behind. And then it was the flawed sniff test, and come on, we all do it. We have to admit. And in reality, what does it mean? You know, somebody might like that flavour, other people might go, oh, that's horrible. It's the same with, you know, the pungent aromas you get off the naturals and things like that. So, and we're not fish, but that people were buying predominantly not of what the bait was made out of, i.e. the physical ingredients of the mass, but just the colour and the flavour. And that's something I learned, where you were basing everything around an assumption. And when you've got multi-worm, now multi-worm really has got this strange smell. It's like a wet dog. But it's all the silkworm chrysalis in there, which has been ground down into this powder. And silkworm chrysalis is really used, especially in Japan, as carp treats and things like that. It's got heavy everything in there. But yeah, multi-worm, you know, on its day. But I think what I'm trying to say is, don't necessarily put flavour and colour at the top. Always put what it's made of at the top. Is it food? Are they going to eat it? It's all well and good. People have said to me, well, I caught on this bait and it only cost me £3 a kilo. And I'm going, yeah, but they've just picked it up. Are they eating all the freebies you've poked out there? Because it's not food. If it's on the hair, they're not actually eating it, are they? It's whether they are actually physically eating it, benefiting it and things like that. So, it's always worth drilling down into the detail, and it's not difficult. Steve, hey, evening. If fishermen want boilies that smell good, maybe we should make baits that smell like chocolate cake. That would be, yeah, that would be a bit of a nightmare, because it'd never go out the door. I'd just be eating it all day long as we made it. Well, to be quite honest, if you look at the flavours, Steve, in all seriousness, like chocolate oranges and all these things over the years, Scopex, Banoffee, they do. And if we're honest with ourselves, do we go, oh, it smells lovely, I think I'll catch on that? Or do we go, I wonder what that's made of? Because that's going to be the thing that really impacts on whether I'm going to catch a lot or some. So, yes, but chocolate orange, I can remember things like that on the old days. Ian saying feeding window is very short in the winter, and that's the thing, you never know, which is why you've got to try and do everything properly in the winter. Move on to showing fish, try hook baits that are going to stand out in the crowd. You don't need to put a lot of a high nutritional value bait in at any time of the year, I suggest, but particularly in the winter. And always do think about breakdowns. A lot of people buy baits, and I'm not saying there's not loads of good baits out there. I don't get into that kind of thing. I do what I do. But just remember, like I said, the breakdown rates. They've been boiled off to, let's just say they've been boiled off for a couple of minutes. The skin's thick. So in the winter, the opportunity of that breaking down and leaking out anything it's been packed with is almost impossible during a short session. I saw something today, and obviously I'm allowed my opinions, and I totally disagree with it. This guy was promoting winter fishing, and he'd basically hardened all of his hook baits off with Himalayan rock salt, so they'd gone like literally bullets. Now, there was no way on earth they would have started to leach anything out. And that's what some of these things I think we're overlooking potentially. So if you remove the skin, or if you pre-soak baits so they're really soft and things like that, always kind of say adapt on the day. If you're just going to use the same bait in the same way all year round, you can only expect the same results. But if you do these little tweaks, and they make common sense if you think about it, you will ultimately, in my humble opinion, catch far more fish. And that's the trouble with, all I can say is I promise you what I'm telling you is what I know in my 30 years experience in the industry and 50 years experience of angling. But some of the stuff I see on YouTube and things, I do sit there and think they're not thinking the same way as me. And that's not to say I'm right or I'm arrogant or anything like that. But surely if you're saying people to, and this guy was saying, basically these baits will survive out being fished for 2 to 3 days. Now, if I hadn't caught a fish in 2 to 3 days, I'd be really thinking I'm doing something wrong. I'm in the wrong place, I'm using the wrong bait. And so he's hardening these baits for actually all the wrong reasons, to give it longevity being fished, when I actually want the bait to be breaking down. I want it to be leaching out flavours. I certainly don't want it to sit there in a sterile format not doing anything. But there we go, that's just me. What's John saying? I guess it's like we can give me new pudding, but you wouldn't want it every day. I would. I'm new to the group and carp fish. What would you recommend for me to use? Welcome Graham. The best thing is to probably put that, because I'm not one for trying to flog anything. I've been very lucky to be able to indulge in some of the areas of angling which I don't think are looked at for lots of different reasons. It could be the expense of things like this. But if you're going to start fishing on a bait this winter, look at jungle. But the other thing is to get honest answers. That's what's good about the team page. It's very honest. You can put a post up on the team page and you will get some great feedback by either the core members or the general population of the team will give you ideas. The other thing is you can always give me a tinkle at the office. I'm more than happy to go through things and point you in the right direction. What I will say is don't buy a lot. You don't need to. This time of year, I'll be pushing people towards the reactive range. These specialised hook baits can really make the difference. Like I have during this feed, we're specialising a hook bait and giving it these extras to give it that kind of wow factor. It's a very open question, Graham, but feel free to give me a call at the office or just ask away. Adam's saying crave. This a surprise. I know Adam's a fan of crave, but you know, bait is on its day. You know, it really is, and it's down to the base mix. It's down to the flavour and attractors, and it's down to the fish. You know, we used to catch a fish at my old lakes time and time again on jungle. You know, we weren't ever catching it on anything else, but it was, you know, jungle, as I explained, it was a milk protein, yellow seed mix, and this fish was always caught in jungle. And is it because they are individuals? Is it because they, you know, they then look like us? You know, what's everybody else's favourite meal here? Mine is, ironically, cheese on toast. That's my thing. You know, if you said to me, right, last meal, Pom, what's it going to be? It'd be cheese on toast. And then lots of people will go steak or... So why aren't fish different? You know, we know dogs can be different. We know other creatures can be different. So I do look at fish as very much individuals. Very much individuals. I wonder if we've come up a mean index to indicate how strong bait traction is. The trouble is, Ian, I've been down this route, and it's a long and sometimes very lonely, and we end up overcomplicating. We don't need to overcomplicate fishing. It isn't complicated. What's happened is in the last 30 years, it's become very complicated. You know, anybody coming into fishing nowadays, I feel really sorry for them. They're told to buy 4.5 pound test curve rods, big pit reels, you know, huge amounts of bait when they're not being explained nutritional values, 1,000,001 rigs when you don't need all that kind of stuff. And I think when you start going down again, looking, there's so many variables on so many different days. As long as your bait is actually a food and you can put proven reactive kind of ingredients with it, everything you can get drawn away, I think, from the basic art of angling. So you can look at all these kind of complicated things, amino acids and loads of 1,000,001 things you could look at, but then you're not focusing on casting at moving fish or moving onto fish or trialing different baits. It's not, if you rig, like, you know, that rig I showed earlier, I've caught, you know, huge amounts of fish, as other people. Why would I change it? That's not the thing I want to change. I want to change the bait. So I personally, I think I've gone full circle. I've gone down all of these things. I've met people who have been historic in making bait. I've met people who just base how they make baits on via assumption. I've been very fortunate to have the fisheries and the anglers around me where we can thoroughly field test. And it all comes back down to basics. You know, a lot of time people literally aren't catching because it's overcomplicated, or they've got a bait that the fish have got no reason to pick up. If it's not food, why would they pick it up other than accidents? So, you know, we're having anglers who will put out sterile baits and expect fish to come and see them. Well, how they can't see them at night, and all these different things come into the mix. So it's a little bit difficult to, What's VR underwater fishing? Good evening, sir. I've been underwater filming and developing a 360 camera for 3 years. All the footage I have always favour dry plain pellet over flavours boilies glugged. Do you genuinely believe that the flavoured spod mix is better than the dry? It all depends when you say it. I mean, like I say, it's always interesting, and that's why I have to look at some of your stuff. Please send me some links. I use underfishing as a good indicator. Also, we've got Galen and Will out in Canada in their good, water conditions, clear water conditions. I think there's so many variables. Like I say, when I'm using, when you say about flavoured spod mix is better than a dry, cheap pellet straight out of the bag. Again, it all comes down to this ingredients. You know, when people, if you look at, say, Pallatrax, high quality pellet, is that going to be more efficient than a cheap, almost like basic wheat germ pellet? I would always go with things that have been developed from the fish farming market. I have fish always favour dry plain pellet over flavours, boilies, glug stuff. Like I say, there's so many variables. I can only tell you what I've done. You are in a very good position to see what you're doing. I mean, it's like I'm more about fish. It's what they sense, not what we see. And and this is the complex kind of areas within baits. So when you say a cheap pellet, it might be cheap, but has it got good ingredients? And if you've got something that, you know, if we take flavours out of fishing completely, would it be a better place? I don't think so. I think, as I said, with my fly fishing, I've seen how fish react. I've seen how fish react to the reactive range, where you're literally casting it as shoving fish, especially when you've got method and things like that, and they're hitting it almost as it hits the bottom. So they're coming in on these things. But you've seen what you've seen. I'd be very, very interested to always, you know, find out what you're doing and how you're doing it. Because, as I say, I think this underwater footage, especially the stuff the guys at Underfishing have been doing, and I know them because they actually fish on stones, and the reason they fish on stones is because they see that fish can potentially spook off the man-made and the obtrusive. But the amount of times that the fish either ignore their bait, completely ignore it, and don't even pick up, well, they'll pick up baits and then just spit them out, and that will give the false impression they're eating it, but they're picking it up and spitting it out because it's not a food source, or they're not prepared to look at it as a food source. So I think there's so many variables on a day, on a particular venue, things like that, and I don't think you can ignore anything, but I would always push forward whatever you are using, making sure it's a high quality proven mix. So interesting from you there, interesting stuff. My missus says jungle smells like chocolate. Possibly, I don't know. Tony, it's a nice earthy smell. The team page is fantastic. Yeah, well, you know, the team is something we're all very, very proud of. Yeah, Team Pallatrax stands for an awful lot, and it's one way that you can use social media to bring people together, to openly discuss, to help, you know, bring newcomers onto the sport, or talk about different tactics that people are using successfully. So, and there's competitions, and there's loads of free prizes, and there's discounts, and all the other things that go with it. So join Team Pallatrax, the more the merrier. It's been really interesting. There's 60 people joined it in the last 10 days. So there you go. Thanks for the advice. Cheers. No worries at all. Everyone is helpful, as Rod's saying. That's about the team. Cheese on toast with Worcester sauce. Ooh, yes, you're not wrong there, you are not wrong. Or jam on cheese on toast boilies. There's a thought. There's a thought. Tabasco, too hot for me. What's VR? What I mean is, fish are brought up with dry pellet. Do you think they feel safe for eating it? I don't. Again, I think these are really good questions, and will we ever be able to define? You know, because as you say, especially if you treat fish as individuals, do they change? Do they adapt? I think. It's like here, the amount of Ashramsworthy pools at my lakes, the amount of fish we catch on the feed pellet, the 17mm feed pellet, especially the ones that have been laced with the hemp, so they actually hemp oil, so they last longer. I mean, are we catching those so often, because it's part of the feed program? And I believe it is, which is actually the same as the squabs bait range here. Are we catching so many fish on that because it's food? And I think we need to just be very careful that how simple fish are. Yes, it could be that a certain fish in a certain pond can be identifying from its life that is what it eats. It's food, and it works. And it's sometimes strange for me when people don't look at the power of pellets, because pellets are made, you know, a decent pellet, Pallatrax, Skretting, you know, people like that. These are totally regulated, really researched for the fish farming market, and that's where, to be honest, a lot of what I do, that's knowledge comes from excuse me, comes from my experience in fish farming. So yeah, what's Callum saying? So, but it's interesting what you're saying, VR, that's for certain. Is there underwater film of boosted versus unboosted baits next to each other on a spot? There possibly is. I don't know of any. I can't pick anything up. But again, that will only give you information on that day, and on that particular fish. So again, I think there is the potential of drilling down too much into the detail. You know, if you set out and you're using the known and the proven, it's then going to be more about location. It's then going to be more about feeding spells. and things like that. So that's just my humble opinion. Oh dear me, Marmite, that's disgusting. Love watching this and reading Catch, so informative. Yes, Catch More Fish. If you don't know, I'll just give it a quick plug. Catch More Fish, our online magazine, is now out, so you can find it on the Pallatrax website, or there's various posts of it. It's our magazine. It's Keith, the editor. He's produced a bumper one this month. It's about 80 pages. Big focus on our trip to Top Cats and things like that. Lots of informative stuff. No hidden agenda again. So look out for it. It's free and it's a proper decent read, and we're building and growing that as well. So do look out for Catch More Fish. Spread the word. Thanks, James. Thanks for putting that. Perhaps somebody could put up if they're able to put up the magazine. That would be good. I think we should have a good chat with VR underwater. Could be very interesting. I agree with you, Ian. Ian's part of the core team. So VR, do reach out to us and have a chat, because there's lots of things that I'll be very interested in speaking to you about, to be quite honest. So there we go. Right. Pom's live feed. Well, let's just go back to the little experiment. And so you can see it started to break open. So just imagine what this is like in real cold water conditions where it's out now. So it'd be really sterile, but we've still got stuff floating around. Movement, you know, undertow, even small fish bashing into it. All of those things will create a different reaction. This is obviously just sat in a tank with no movement and no, you know, doesn't really give you the full truth. But what you do know, okay, it's fishing on a really effective rig, really effective hook with the grips, and that is all food, and it's been boosted. So of course you can't say time after time that that's going to catch you loads of fish, but you can think that has been designed to catch me loads of fish, and therefore it's worth getting involved with. You know, if you're just going to put a bait out that's sat on a shelf for 6 months, 10 months, whatever, you chuck it out, it's sterile, it's not made of food source, it's got nothing to actually draw fish in to feed it, why would it catch? The only reason it will catch is just through luck, to be quite honest. Fish comes along, picks it up out of curiosity, ejects it for one reason or another. I don't want that to happen. I want them to actually, you know, be with a shout. Where are we? Sorry. We should try and get Matt Hayes and Mick Brown on the live stream. Yeah, I do know Matt, to be quite honest, but we do have plans afoot for the whole live stream system. Watch this space. Paul, talking about the mag, do you have a counter on it? All we can do is, as far as I'm aware, Paul, it's all far too technical, things like that, but is basically we can see how many people open it up and read it and how long they're reading it for and things like that. So, and it's a lot of people, which is good. I think it's the only magazine of its type. There's loads of free competitions in there, easy to enter competitions, as many team members know, because I know a lot of team members win some great prizes. We've got some great sponsors like Rigged and Ready and the Print Biz and people like that. I'm talking to more people who are in the trade. I don't want it to be heavy like with adverts. So what I'm saying to people in the trade, if you want a advert, if you give us a prize, we'll make that into the advert, so you, the angler, has a chance of winning, and at the same time going, oh, that's from company X or company Y. But I don't want none of this hard sell stuff. I think we've seen all that from the old days, and it doesn't work. What's Cliff saying? And then I'm going to draw the competition. Fish definitely have preferences. I have lakes within a few miles of each other where a bait is killer on one but won't get picked up on another. There's a small number that seem to work everywhere here and in Thailand, but are consistent rather than the best on all. Totally right. You know, it's like here, I've got three waters step down into the valley, and it can be getting smashed on multi-room down the bottom, people fishing multi-room at the top, nothing. And it's the same when I had Paddington. You know, they were right next to each other, and, you know, you couldn't catch on one bait in one water, but you'd smash it on the other. So it just shows you there is so many variables in the mix. And that's why, I personally recommend simplify your fishing. You know, we take far too much stuff fishing nowadays, don't we? Come on, let's be honest. I certainly used to do. Now I'm very much a resealable bag man and get away with as little as possible. And just focus on you know, the proven. So it's not sent you my phone number, could chat to you for days. That'll be interesting. Look forward to that. Thank you very, very much. I'll contact you this week. John, there we go. Now we know VR's John. Do you sell your products to tackle shops to sell? Well, interesting story. Basically, what's the best way to explain it? We are a disruptor. So I came out with things like the stones and subsequently grips and, you know, and all the different things like what I was showing tonight. And it didn't fit in with the narrative, but there seems to be a distinct change now where shops are actually approaching us. So several years ago we used to deal with certain shops, and I pulled back to kind of reset. We started the team, started the online kind of showcasing the products and showing how they work, and we're still a long way off where we should need to be to actually show how to get the best out of all of these baits. And but as of next week, we go back. We've got a big meeting on the 14th, and then we have Colin Cannon has come on board to head up sales for me to go back to shops and to fisheries, because obviously everything I've done has always been around my fishery management experience, you know, to produce effective but safe quality products and baits. So yeah, we will be going back this year to shops in a bigger way in the UK, but also outside of the UK. We have built up that traction. I think more and more anglers, I can appreciate them being cynical and suspicious when they first meet Pallatrax, but once you actually get to know us and, like, you know, look at all the team members and people like that, you'll quickly realise there is no hidden agenda. You know, the man at the helm is got his reasons for doing what he's doing, which is to help us catch more fish, not to be expensive, not to be complicated, to base everything on common sense, but also to leave a positive in nature. And we're seeing more fisheries gravitate. You know, they're suddenly realising that dumping huge amounts of lead isn't, you know, the best practice. Far from it. You know, using baits that actually rot and don't feed are, and so people are starting to look at us, even though we've been doing this a long time. It's quite exciting. Even though I'm getting older and greyer, it is getting more and more exciting. And I think part of that is the industry's helping us, because the industry hasn't moved forward. You know, it might bring power packs out or a new bivvy or, you know, new pod or 4.5 pound Tesco rods or whatever, but it's not bringing out anything underwater. That is what, in my humble opinion, really counts. Underwater and watercraft, combine those two, you'll catch loads of fish. And there has to be a reason, because we're not sitting there saying, look, we're fantastic anglers, but there has to be a reason why we catch so consistently. And if you follow the stone system and why we use it and think about it, it's only made of common sense. It's not me sitting there going, buy loads, because you don't need to. You don't need to. But what you do need to do is put it in the right place at the right time. And those things, I can point you in the right direction, but to be quite honest, they're things that people learn on their angling journey. But it's interesting to see that more and more shops, and we will definitely be very active about that. So, yes, watch this space. Do you think that rigs need to evolve and fish learn to reject what they've been caught on before? Good question again, John. But again, it's too many variables, and I think that is the problem. If you look at all other areas of fishing I've done, I've been very fortunate. You know, I've had boats abroad and back in the UK, fly fish to a very high standard, match fish when I was younger and things like that. And if you look at all of this focus, and I suppose having had 2 tackle shops, that certainly opened my eyes up as well, where reps would come in and go, look, we've got this new rig. You need to buy these bits. And I'm sitting there like taking it all in the early days and go, oh, that's great. So why does it work? And it's like, well, yeah, but we're going to market it. It'll sell it and things like that. You know, no other area of fishing, match fishing, if you think about it, match fishing is the one indicator where the anglers say, I'm good. I'm winning every week. I'm framing out. I'm taking the big prizes, etc., etc. They're not fishing on all of these weird and wonderful super duper rigs. They're fishing unobtrusively and effectively, and that is the problem, I think, or one of the many problems is, and I see it here when people come to my lakes, and I saw it in my old lakes, people would come and they put so much emphasis off the back of marketing they'd seen, and they were using rigs that, to be quite honest, and I think that's, again, that's the frustration. You can catch a big fish and lots of fish on really bad rigs every now and again, but it's about that consistency. So I'm sure, without a shadow of doubt, because I've seen underwater footage where fish have literally picked it up, and the assumption is, oh, they're going to bolt off and the big lead's going to pull a hook over, and they don't. They just sit there and they're blowing, sucking and blowing, sucking, and then because it's the hook's just purchased, it comes out. So surely we should be giving them, that credibility that they have the. Well, I say, look at big fish. Look at these fish that are 40, 50, 60 pounds in the UK. They only get caught once in a blue moon. Are we saying that the only time they pick it up, that one time, is the only time they've picked up that they actually get caught? What are they doing all the other time? They're the biggest fish in the lake, so they have to be feeding more to attain and maintain that weight. I think the biggest problem, if you want my humble opinion, and it's just my opinion, and so I'm not here to spoil fishing for everybody, is the fact is, if you look at everybody's rig wallets, all the rigs are different. There's no consistency. And if you look at our rigs, they're all consistent. And it's like I explained before, it's like having a mouse trap. If you go into, I don't know, Wix or something like that, B&Q, and you go to the mouse trap section, all mouse traps are basically designed the same way, with a pressure pad and a little thing that flips over and one thing or another. Yes, they might have different boxes, different colour boxes, but the actual dynamics and the principle is solid. So you haven't got lots of different variations of mouse traps or rat traps. So as long as you take that and you put the right bait and in the right place, that trap invariably will catch you the mouse. And we know that mouse can still get away with it. They can still nick the cheese or whatever's on there. And that's the problem. If you go to the kind of international hair rig scene, it's all different. So therefore, how can you get any consistency? And that's what I've been doing this a long time. This is just my opinion. Like I say, I've got two go-to rigs, and I focus on other areas. I'm like the match angler. I'll be feeding what's the bait made of, how to feed it on the day, where to put it, things like that. I think this complication with rigs is one reason why people don't catch a lot of fish. And time again here, I do my best to help people, and I'll literally be, helping them tying up rigs, and they'll have gone from catching nothing to catching many. And the only thing they've changed is the rig. And some of these rigs and some of the way people interpret them, like there must be an original Ronnie rig, but I've seen 101 interpretations of the Ronnie rig. So people say I'm fishing on the Ronnie rig, but the design's all over the place. So I don't think we need to, what's suggested as evolving, I would suggest, is taking us further and further and further away from where we need to be, which is simple, effective. Look at where the hair rig coming from. Look at the dynamics of rigs, and also look at the different interpretations. So with different interpretations, you're only ever going to get different results, which is not what I think we need. We need good results, proven results. And I believe if people didn't, weren't making all of these different weird and wonderful rigs, I think the catch rates would be a lot higher, because you've only got to look at underfishing, and perhaps yourself, John, where you see fish come in, pick up bait up, the hair's too long, so the fish just pick up the bait and then just spit it out, or the rig just doesn't perform. Especially, I've seen so many fish eject Ronnie rigs, you'd be thinking, well, I'm never going to fish on that rig. So, but obviously with loads of people fishing on it, therefore a proportion of fish will be caught on it, and there potentially will give false information, people going, that's a really good rig. But if you've got 1,000 people fishing on it, the chances are a few will be caught, if that makes sense. Would you ever have your products in Angling Direct? Never say never, Callum. Right, I'm going to go through these last ones, folks. The amount of stupid comments on my Stones TikTok video about how lead was better blew my mind. Yes, Jason, it's, the irony is, and take this with with zero arrogance, because there is none. You know, we're fishing at a very high level, as you can see tonight. We're embracing the biology of fish, you know, all the different things that go on. If you ask anybody outside of fishing, would you use a stone weight or a man-made toxic weight, everybody will say to you, well, stone, it's common sense. The trouble is, the narrative has been by the major companies, or many of them, that you've got to use lead, you've got to dump it, it's not a problem when it is. And because we're fishing and acknowledging that, you know, fish sense within their environment, it's not what we see, it's what they sense, as I said earlier. It is absolute common sense. And so when people come out with these, you know, incredible comments about stones and it's a gimmick and things like that, the irony is, for me, a lump of poisonous metal covered in green and the industry telling me it's camouflage, that's the gimmick. So we know we're on a safe platform. It's just a shame that the industry has such a huge kind of focus on marketing things the way they market it and dismissing the really important things which I'm talking about. What's James saying? I think that over time fish will wise up and learn that certain rigs and baits mean they will be caught. You see it on lakes where certain fish haven't been caught in X years due to recognising rigs and bait with being hooked. Again, you know, we have to be careful, James, because, you know, we're building on assumptions, but obviously it does also make common sense. I think a lot of the times is just because people aren't fishing consistently, so therefore the results won't be consistent. We're catching these big fish down here consistently, but we're all fishing the same way, and that's why we're catching them. You know, I think there is always that potential that fish will recognise and spook off and things like that, and hence why we're fishing with stones, hence why we're scaling down. But it's one of those conundrums, isn't it? It's that's what makes it fishing industry interesting. We'll never actually know, and it's exciting. What was this? The one that gets me is bet they won't cast. I've never fished anywhere I can't. No, I know it's madness, James. It's madness. This whole thing about stones has upset so many people in the industry because it makes sense and it actually proves, and it's been proven to make sense. The density is of a benefit, and they come out with this. It doesn't cast. Well, all I can say, perhaps they can't cast very well, because I'm not the best caster in the world, and I can cast a stone, especially a stone wrapped with a bit of paste or a bit of method. I can start casting it to the horizon. Now, I have missed out some questions, so I do apologise for that. I'll just finish off. True about fish not moving while eating. I had a 50-pounder eating and lying down for 90 seconds without moving while chewing. Yeah, you're totally well. You'll see it up close and personal. John used two rigs. The problem I have is that people want to see the weird and wonderful rigs, so I have to use them while filming to get the audience. No, you know, like I say, John, I appreciate it, and that is the difficulty, because I say I know the guys are underfishing very well, and they're obviously working with other companies, and they have to show off the rigs and things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're fans of them. They just have to show them. But I think what's incredible is how much does get edited out that the angler doesn't see. How many rigs are just not working. So that's why I've had to order more. Gave my stones away to someone in Australia as he was so impressed. There you go. Ian Brookman, last one. A bolt rig works if a fish bolts. Spooky fish feel the weight, sit out and blow the rig out. A running rig gives far better indication. Yeah, I'm a fan of running rig, without a shadow of a doubt. I think the bolt rig is one of the reasons why you know, a lot of fish don't get caught. As soon as they feel resistance, we know it, match fishing especially. Right, I'll give you one quick last look at this. Then I shall go to tell you who won. So you can still see bits and pieces still coming out. And I've well got over my time. Oh, let me... Oh. And tonight's winner, I recognise this name as well, is young Sean Davies. Sean, you have won tonight's prize, so congratulations. So just send me a Facebook message with your details and we will get that prize off to you. So fantastic. Right, folks, well, as I say, Happy New Year. lots going to be happening on the Pallatrax front. So thanks for all your support to date. Watch this space. If you ever have any questions, obviously always feel free to reach out to me, connect with me. There you go. So, wow, thanks. Mars is a keen thing. So, yeah, well done, Sean. That's a nice little prize. I'll get that all back in the freezer for you and get that off to you sometime this week. So, next week we'll be back on the team page. Please keep on spreading the word. You know, we're getting the truth out there. More and more people are engaging and we're catching fish, which is fantastic, you know, both here and abroad. So, onwards and only upwards. But thanks ever so much again. Best of wishes for 2026. I'll see a lot more of you. And always, like I say, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I don't know it all, but I do know some stuff. And if I can help you, I'm always here to help. So on that, stay safe, good night, and catch up soon. Cheers.